Hey guys, in this video I'll show you how to build and play a Necromancer tank, if you're a beginner. I'll be covering mostly stuff like skills and gear that you should use. If you want to learn about the very basics of tanking, I have a separate video and a website guide about it. Speaking of which, this beginner Necromancer guide is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides, you can read it there instead. Necromancers have the best damage mitigation out of all classes. They take 10% reduced damage thanks to Spirit Guardian, and 3% thanks to Necrotic Potency. Then on top of that, they gain 15% damage reduction for dots, from the Disdain Harm passive. And the hardest boss fights in the game happen to be all about dots, which makes Necromancers one of the best choices. They have access to Glacial Colossus ultimate, which isn't the only source of major vulnerability, since Turning Tide and Archdruid Deverick exist, but it's still great because it allows your group to use different item sets in place of these two. And you'll be able to use this or any other ultimate a lot, thanks to Necrotic Potency, which allows you to consume corpses to gain ultimate, and it will also proc the corpse consumption passive, generating even more ultimate. You will also have an easy time sustaining your resources in trash fights, or in any boss fight with lots of adds, thanks to the Death Gleaning passive, which restores a bit of your resources whenever a nearby enemy dies. This is the skill setup you're going to use. The first skill is Shield Throw, with the Taunt, Sage's Remedy and Maim script combination on it. If you do not have access to scribing, you should replace Shield Throw with Pierce Armor. You will also have to replace Elemental Susceptibility with Destructive Clench, but we'll get to that later. Next is Spirit Guardian. This skill will provide a tiny amount of healing, and more importantly, it will grant you 10% damage reduction. It will also generate a corpse when it runs out, or if you recast it after 8 seconds have passed. Next is Necrotic Potency, which will passively reduce your damage taken by 3%, and it will allow you to suck corpses, to heal yourself, and generate 6 ultimate per corpse. Next we have Ulfsild's Contingency, and you should use the Damage Shield, Gladiator's Tenacity, and Intellect and Endurance combination on it. Use the Defensive Stance, Revealing Flare, or Heroic Slash, instead of Ulfsild's Contingency, if you don't have access to scribing. Next is Hungry Scythe, your main self-heal. Temporal Guard ultimate isn't meant to be cast, it's there to passively grant you minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 5%. On the back bar we have Summoner's Armor. This is your source of major resolve. It also grants you minor resolve, but it's not that big of a deal, because we will be using Resolving Vigor anyway, because it's too good of a heal to give it up. Next skill is Wield Soul, and you should use the Pull, Druid's Resurgence, and Cowardice combination on it. If you do not have access to scribing, you should use Silver Leash instead. Elemental Susceptibility provides lots of very important debuffs. As I said at the beginning of the skill section, if you do not have access to scribing, you should replace it with Destructive Clench, so that you still have access to a Range Taunt, with Major Maim. Elemental Blockade will constantly proc your Crusher enchant. Next up we have Resolving Vigor. Even though we're already getting minor resolve from Summoner's Armor, Resolving Vigor is still worth it just for the heal over time, because its scaling is extremely strong. Next we have Glacial Colossus ultimate. It will apply major vulnerability to your enemies, increasing their damage taken by 10%. If you're playing without a healer, so in a 1 tank 3 damage dealers composition, then you should use Aggressive Horn instead. Aggressive Horn ultimate will grant you and your teammates a 10% maximum stamina and magicka buff for 30 seconds, which is roughly a 2.5% damage increase. It will also grant everyone a shorter 10-second major force buff, which increases critical damage by 20%, and is roughly an 8% damage increase. And last few things, as much as I'm trying to make it a single setup, there will be fights where you will just have to slot some situational stuff. You will have to slot Crushing Shock for fights that require ranged interrupts, such as Turvokun in Fangler Dungeon, or Ansul in Sanity's Edge Trial. And you will have to slot Immovable for fights that require lots of block mitigation, such as Archdruid Deverick in Erdenroot Enclave Dungeon, or Zalvaka in Rokurov Trial. This is the crafted gear setup you can start with. You do not need to start with a crafted setup, and you can move on straight to the setup from dungeons, because normal difficulty dungeons are easy enough to clear while wearing random gear pieces you pick up from questing. This crafted setup is for people who are anxious about tanking, and need a stepping stone setup, even though it isn't really needed. Sets like Fortified Brass or Central Defender, though this one is from Overland, not crafted, can be better than Druid's Braid, but Druid's Braid has the benefit of not becoming mostly useless when you stop wearing 5 pieces of it. And it's important because I can't know what content you're going to farm first. Are you going to get a monster set first and replace head and shoulder slots? Or are you replacing weapons and jewelry first? With Druid's Braid, it doesn't matter, because it's slowly losing effectiveness piece by piece. The Druid's Blade shield will also stay relevant for you, even past your beginner phase. Now this is a starting setup you can get from dungeons. Turning Tide drops from normal or veteran Shipwright's Regret. Crimson Oath's Rive drops from normal or veteran the Dreadcellar. Tremor Scale drops from veteran Volenfell. Trainee drops from starter zones. Druid's Braid is crafted. Replace Trainee and Druid's Braid with Puncturing Remedy, which drops from normal or veteran Dragonstar Arena, if you don't have access to scribing and are using Pierce Armor. Tri-stat enchants are better than single stat ones, but they're extremely expensive. And the reason I listed them here, but not in the crafted setup, is because Tremor Scale and Turning Tide will stay relevant past your beginner phase. So if you can afford tri-stat enchants, you should go for it. This is the setup for dungeons, and here's a few more options. Use Puncturing Remedy on your front bar if you're using Pierce Armor. Use Vestments of Olorim instead of Saxil's Champion if you're playing without a healer in a 1-tank 3 damage dealers group comp. Turning Tide is a decent alternative for Loosened Echoes. War Machine and Powerful Assault are decent alternatives for Saxil's Champion. Crimson Oath's Wrath is also a decent alternative for Saxil's Champion, but it will be useless for damage dealers who already brought enough armor penetration on their own. This is the setup for Pack Trials as a main tank. This setup is a recommendation for random pack groups. In an organized trial, always listen to what the raid lead wants you to wear, rather than what I'm showing here. Same as last time, use Puncturing Remedy on your front bar, if you're using Pierce Armor. Crimson Oath's Rive has 2 bonus armor lines, which together will grant you 2974 additional armor. This might allow you to shift armor in other parts of your build, like for example switching off of the Lady Mundus, or changing Fortified or Bulwark champion points to something different. Crimson Oath's Rive will be rendered useless if a damage dealer in your group is wearing Alkosh, but it's very unlikely you'll find a damage dealer wearing a support set in a random pack group. And this is the setup for Pack Trials as an off-tank. Same as last time, this is just a recommendation. So in an organized trial, always listen to what the raid wants you to wear, rather than what I'm showing here. Once again, use Puncturing Remedy on your front bar if you're using Pierce Armor. Moving on to champion points. On your blue tree, you should use Ironclad, Duelist's Rebuff, Enduring Resolve, and Bulwark. On your red tree, you should use Boundless Vitality, Fortified, Rejuvenation, and Bracing Anchor. If you run Nord with fully golded out gear and proper trades, you will be over the armor cap of these champion points, so you can replace either Bulwark or Fortified. You could replace them with, for example, Focus Mending, Unassailable, Bastion, Shieldmaster, Sustained by Suffering, or Wardmaster. Moving on to race. Nord is by far the best race for tanking, due to the increased armor from Rugged and ulti generation from Stalwart. You can complete any content on any race. You will just have to work slightly harder with other races, and you'll have to adjust your build and get more armor from somewhere else. Now moving on to Mundus. The best Mundus is the Achnak, which increases your magical recovery by 310 and causes your armor pieces with the Divine trait to increase it by another 28. If you're struggling with reaching the armor cap of 33,000, then the Lady can also be a decent choice. It increases your armor by 2,744. Moving on to attributes. Majority of the times, you should put all your points into health. However, you need your max stamina to be higher than your max magicka, because the combustion synergy restores your dominant resource, and you want it to be stamina. Because of that, you might have to put some attribute points into stamina, if you have passives, such as for example the Gift of Magnus Racial, or items with bonuses, such as for example 1-piece bonus of Encrates' Behemoth, that increase your max magicka. Put just enough points to make your max stamina higher than your max magicka, and then put the rest into health. Now moving on to food. The best food is Orzorga's Smoked Bear Haunch. However, it's extremely expensive, so you should use Jewels of Misrule instead. It provides only slightly lower stats than Orzorga, while being significantly cheaper. As for other useful foods, we have Orzorga's Red Frofgar, which provides more max health and magical recovery, at the cost of providing no stamina recovery at all. Stamina recovery doesn't work while blocking, so it can be a decent option if you're perma-blocking. Bewitched Sugar Skulls provides maximum resources instead of recoveries. It can be decent for fights where you need to block for a very long time during a very specific period, but the pressure is non-existent outside of that specific period, so you can recuperate stamina by heavy attacking freely, like for example Roxa the Warped boss in Balsonar dungeon. The increased maximum resources will also increase the scaling of some of your healing abilities, such as Resolving Vigor. And the last one is Candied Jester's Coin, provides only max stamina and magical recovery. It can be decent when you want to reduce your max health during a specific phase of a fight. For example in Cloud Rest, you can eat it right as the execute phase starts, because maximum health becomes a detriment due to the Baneful Mark mechanic. Moving on to potions. Most of the time, you should use the Tri-Stat potions, which restore health, stamina, magicka, and increase all the recoveries. They will greatly improve your sustain. You can craft them by combining Columbine, Baglos, and Mountain's Flower. There are better potions, but they're extremely expensive, so they're only worth using when you're tryharding for the most difficult achievements, such as Trial Trifectas. Heroism potions can provide 100% uptime on minor heroism buff, which generates ultimate, but they're extremely expensive because they're crafted by combining Dragonrium, Dragon's Blood, and Columbine. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below, or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.